Hey guys, tonight we explore the quiet, methodical world of palace servants, those countless individuals who spent their lives in the steady rhythm of royal service, tending to the daily needs of kings and queens with the same careful attention that farmers gave to their crops or craftsmen gave to their tools. From the early morning tasks of lighting fires and preparing breakfast, to the evening duties of banking embers and securing the palace for night, we'll discover the calm, repetitive patterns that shaped the lives of thousands of people who lived and worked behind palace walls. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together through the measured, predictable world of palace service, where every day followed the same gentle rhythm and every task had its proper time and place. When you think of medieval palaces, you might imagine grand feasts and glittering ceremonies, but the reality was far more ordinary and methodical. For every moment of royal pageantry, there were hundreds of hours of quiet, steady work performed by servants who understood that their job was to make palace life run as smoothly and invisibly as a well-oiled water wheel, turning day after day with the same reliable motion. Palace servants lived their lives according to the gentle but unchanging rhythm of royal routine. They rose each morning at the same hour, performed the same tasks in the same order, and retired each evening knowing that tomorrow would bring the same familiar pattern of work. This predictability wasn't a burden, but a comfort, providing structure and purpose to lives that might otherwise have been uncertain and chaotic. The servants' world was organised around the simple principle that royal comfort required constant, careful attention to thousands of small details. A chamber had to be heated to exactly the right temperature, maintained throughout the day, and carefully banked at night. Food had to be prepared with precise timing so that it arrived at the royal table at the perfect moment, neither too hot nor too cold, neither too early nor too late. These weren't dramatic or exciting tasks, but they required real skill and dedication. A servant who understood how to maintain a fire properly could keep a royal chamber comfortable all day with minimal fuel. A cook who mastered the timing of different dishes could coordinate complex meals that satisfied royal tastes and dietary requirements. A chambermaid who learned the preferences of her assigned royal family could anticipate their needs and prepare for them before being asked. The palace operated like a vast, quiet machine where every person had their specific role, and every role contributed to the smooth functioning of the whole. Kitchen servants rose before dawn to begin the slow process of bread making, kneading dough and monitoring ovens with the same patient attention that bakers had given to their craft for centuries. Stable servants followed ancient routines for caring for horses, feeding and grooming the animals with methods that had proven effective generation after generation. The servants' day began in the quiet darkness before dawn, when the palace was still and peaceful, and the only sounds were the soft footsteps of early workers moving through familiar corridors to begin their morning tasks. This was not a time of hurried panic or frantic activity, but of calm preparation for the day ahead, as servants lit candles and fires and began the gentle process of bringing the palace to life. The first task for most servants was the simple but essential work of tending fires. Throughout the palace, dozens of fireplaces needed attention each morning, as the embers from the previous day were carefully uncovered, fresh wood was added, and flames were coaxed back to life with the patient skill that came from years of practice. This was quiet work, performed with steady hands and careful attention to the needs of each fire. Kitchen servants began their day with the methodical preparation of breakfast, following recipes and techniques that had been perfected over many years of royal service. Bread that had been started the night before was checked and shaped. Porridge was prepared in large copper pots that gleamed in the firelight, and small details were attended to with the same care that a gardener might give to tending young plants. The preparation of the royal morning meal required coordination between many different servants, but this coordination happened naturally, through established routines that everyone understood and followed. The baker knew exactly when the bread would be ready. The cook knew how long the porridge needed to simmer, and the serving staff knew precisely when to arrive in the kitchen to collect the prepared food. Chamber servants moved through the royal apartments with quiet efficiency, replacing water in washing basins, emptying chamber pots, and adding fresh wood to bedroom fires. These were intimate tasks that required discretion and sensitivity, as servants worked around sleeping royalty without disturbing their rest. The ability to move silently through royal chambers was a skill that took time to develop and required constant attention to detail. The royal rising was an elaborate but peaceful ceremony that unfolded according to established patterns that everyone involved understood perfectly. Personal servants knew exactly which garments to prepare, in what order they should be presented, and how to assist with dressing without hurrying or confusing the process. This was ceremonial work, but it was performed with the calm efficiency of any other daily task. Laundry work began early in the morning with the sorting and soaking of linens and garments that needed cleaning. This was methodical work that required knowledge of different fabrics and stains, as servants determined which items needed special treatment and which could be cleaned using standard methods. Large copper tubs were filled with water that had been heated over carefully maintained fires, and soap was prepared from materials that the palace produced or purchased in bulk. Cleaning tasks throughout the palace followed established patterns that ensured every area received proper attention without wasting time or effort. Servants knew which rooms needed daily cleaning, which required attention every few days, and which could be thoroughly cleaned on a weekly basis. This systematic approach meant that the palace remained clean and well maintained without requiring frantic bursts of activity or emergency cleaning sessions. Garden work followed the natural rhythms of the seasons, as servants attended to plants and grounds according to weather conditions and the natural cycles of growth and dormancy. In spring, they planted seeds and tended young shoots. In summer, they watered and weeded established plants. In autumn, they harvested crops and prepared gardens for winter. In winter, they maintained tools and planned for the coming growing season. The morning hours were also used for maintenance tasks that kept the palace functioning properly. Servants checked and repaired furniture, mended torn fabrics, sharpened knives and tools, and attended to hundreds of small details that prevented minor problems from becoming major difficulties. This preventive maintenance was performed regularly and systematically, ensuring that palace equipment remained in good working order. Personal hygiene and grooming tasks for servants were performed efficiently during brief breaks in the morning routine. Servants had access to washing facilities and clean water, though these resources were shared among many people and had to be used carefully and considerately. The palace provided basic necessities for servant cleanliness, understanding that clean servants were healthier and more pleasant to be around. Food preparation for the midday meal began during the morning hours, as cooks started slow-cooking stews and roasts that would be ready at the proper time. This required planning and timing, as different dishes needed different amounts of cooking time, and everything had to be ready simultaneously. The kitchen operated on a schedule that was as precise as the movements of a clock, with each task beginning and ending at its appointed time. Inventory and supply management were ongoing morning tasks, as servants checked stores of food, fuel, and other necessities to ensure that the palace would have everything needed for the day's activities. This inventory work was careful and systematic, with experienced servants able to estimate consumption rates and plan for future needs based on established patterns of palace life. The morning hours established the peaceful rhythm that would continue throughout the day, as servants settled into their work patterns and the palace began to function with the smooth efficiency that made royal life possible. This was not exciting or dramatic work, but it was essential and satisfying, providing servants with the knowledge that they were contributing to something larger than themselves through their careful attention to daily duties. By mid-morning, the palace was fully awake and functioning, with every servant engaged in their assigned tasks and every department operating according to established routines. The transition from the quiet darkness of early morning to the busy activity of full daylight happened gradually and naturally, like the slow warming of a room when a fire is properly tended and allowed to grow at its own pace. The royal kitchen was the steady heartbeat of palace life, a place where the ancient arts of cooking and food preparation were practiced with the same careful attention to tradition and technique that monks gave to copying manuscripts or craftsmen gave to their specialized trades. This was not a place of chaos or confusion, but rather a well-organized workspace where experienced cooks followed time-tested methods to produce the large quantities of food that palace life required. The kitchen complex consisted of several connected rooms, each designed for specific types of food preparation. The main cooking area featured massive stone fireplaces that burned constantly, providing the heat needed for roasting large pieces of meat and maintaining the steady temperatures required for bread baking. These fires were tended with the same care that blacksmiths gave to their forges, as the proper maintenance of cooking fires was essential for successful food preparation. Bread making was perhaps the most methodical and predictable of all kitchen activities, following patterns that had been established over centuries of practice. The process began each evening when bakers mixed large batches of dough using flour, water, salt, and yeast in proportions that experienced bakers knew by feel and sight, rather than precise measurement. This dough was left to rise overnight in wooden troughs that were kept in a warm area near the fires. In the early morning hours, the risen dough was shaped into loaves of various sizes, depending on who would be eating the bread. Royal loaves were smaller and made from finer flour, while servant bread was coarser and more substantial. The shaped loaves were placed on wooden boards and allowed to rise again before being placed in the stone ovens that had been heated to the proper temperature through careful management of wood fires. The baking process required constant attention and experience, as bakers judged the readiness of bread by its colour, the sound it made when tapped, and the smell that indicated proper cooking. This knowledge came from years of practice and could not be learned quickly or easily. Experienced bakers could manage multiple batches of bread at different stages of preparation, ensuring that fresh loaves were always available when needed. Meat preparation followed equally systematic methods, as cooks selected animals from the palace livestock and prepared them according to established techniques for different types of dishes. Large roasts were prepared for royal meals, while smaller pieces were used for stews and other dishes that would feed larger numbers of people. The kitchen maintained stores of preserved meats that had been salted, smoked or dried, according to traditional methods that ensured food would remain safe to eat for extended periods. Vegetable preparation was seasonal work that adapted to the natural cycles of garden production. In spring, cooks worked with fresh greens and early vegetables that provided variety after the limited diet of winter. Summer brought abundant fresh produce that was used immediately and also preserved for later use. Autumn was the time for processing large quantities of vegetables into forms that would last through the winter months. The preparation of sauces and seasonings required specialized knowledge of herbs and spices, as cooks combined different ingredients to create flavors that enhanced the natural tastes of meat and vegetables. This knowledge was passed down from experienced cooks to apprentices through careful demonstration and practice, as the proper use of seasonings could transform simple ingredients into dishes worthy of royal tables. Dairy work was performed daily. The servants churned butter, made cheese, and managed the milk provided by palace cows. This work followed natural rhythms that could not be hurried or altered, as milk had to be processed within certain time periods to prevent spoilage. The palace maintained its own dairy animals and processing equipment, ensuring a reliable supply of fresh dairy products. Food storage was a constant concern, as the kitchen had to maintain adequate supplies while preventing spoilage and waste. Root vegetables were stored in cool, dry cellars where they could last for months. Grains were kept in sealed containers that protected them from moisture and rodents. Preserved foods were organized systematically, so that older items were used before newer ones, ensuring that nothing was wasted through age or neglect. The serving of meals required coordination between kitchen staff and dining room servants, as food had to be transferred from cooking areas to royal dining rooms, while still at the proper temperature and in good condition. This transfer was accomplished through established routines that everyone understood, with servants carrying dishes through corridors that connected the kitchen to various dining areas throughout the palace. Cleaning tasks in the kitchen were ongoing and essential, as cooking generated large quantities of dirty pots, plates, and utensils that had to be washed and prepared for reuse. This work was performed systematically, with different servants responsible for different types of cleaning tasks. Large copper pots were scrubbed with sand and salt, wooden utensils were cleaned and oiled to prevent cracking, and stone surfaces were scrubbed with stiff brushes and hot water. The kitchen also served as a training ground where young servants learned the skills they would need for advancement within the palace hierarchy. Apprentice cooks learned by watching experienced workers and gradually taking on more complex tasks as their skills developed. This apprenticeship system ensured that kitchen knowledge was preserved and passed on to new generations of servants. Waste management was handled efficiently, as food scraps were fed to palace animals, bones were saved for making soup stock, and even ash from the fires was collected for use in soap making and other household tasks. Nothing useful was discarded, as the palace operated on principles of efficiency and conservation that made the most of every resource. The rhythm of kitchen work was determined by meal times and the natural pace of cooking processes that could not be hurried. Experienced kitchen staff learned to judge timing so that different dishes would be ready simultaneously, creating meals that satisfied royal expectations without wasting time or ingredients. This timing was achieved through experience and careful attention to the natural progression of cooking tasks. During quiet periods between meal preparation, kitchen servants maintained equipment, organised supplies, and performed the countless small tasks that kept the kitchen functioning efficiently. This ongoing maintenance prevented problems and ensured that the kitchen could respond quickly to special requests or unexpected needs that might arise during palace life. The servants' quarters were located in the lower levels and back areas of the palace, spaces that were designed for function rather than beauty, where hundreds of people lived in conditions that were simple but adequate for their needs. These areas operated according to their own rhythms and traditions, creating a community within the larger palace structure where servants could rest, socialise, and attend to their personal needs during the limited time they had away from their duties. The sleeping arrangements for servants reflected the practical needs of people who worked different schedules and shared limited space. Dormitory rooms housed multiple servants in beds that were simple but sturdy, built from wood and rope with straw mattresses that provided basic comfort for tired workers. These beds were arranged in rows that made efficient use of available space, while allowing each person some small area for personal belongings. Personal possessions were stored in wooden chests or cloth bags that could be secured against theft, and easily moved if servants were reassigned to different quarters. Most servants owned very few personal items, as their lives were focused on work rather than material accumulation, but they treasured small mementos of family, simple books or religious items, and the basic tools needed for their specific duties. The allocation of the living space followed the same hierarchical principles that governed all aspects of palace life, with higher-ranking servants receiving better accommodations, while lower-ranking workers shared more crowded quarters. Senior servants might have small private rooms, while junior servants shared dormitory space with 5 or 6 others. These arrangements were accepted as natural and appropriate, reflecting each person's position within the palace structure. Heating and lighting in servants' quarters were basic but adequate, with small fireplaces in common areas that provided warmth during cold weather. Servants contributed wood and other fuel for these fires, understanding that shared resources required shared responsibility. Oil lamps and candles provided light during evening hours, though these were used sparingly due to cost and fire safety concerns. Common areas served multiple purposes, functioning as dining spaces during mealtimes, work areas when servants needed to mend clothing or perform other personal tasks, and social spaces during rare leisure hours. These rooms were furnished simply with long wooden tables and benches that could accommodate many people, and were sturdy enough for various types of use. Washing facilities were shared among groups of servants, with water provided in large basins that were refilled regularly from palace wells. Servants took turns using these facilities according to informal schedules that developed naturally among people who lived and worked together. The palace provided basic soap and other necessities for cleanliness, understanding that clean servants were healthier and more pleasant to be around. Privacy was limited in servants' quarters, as the design of these spaces emphasized efficiency and shared resources rather than individual comfort. Servants learned to respect each other's need for quiet and personal space within the constraints of their living arrangements. This communal lifestyle required consideration and cooperation, qualities that were essential for maintaining harmony among people who spent most of their time together. Food service for servants was organised efficiently, with meals served at specific times in common dining areas. The food provided to servants was simpler than royal meals but adequate and nutritious, consisting of bread, porridge, vegetables, and occasional meat dishes prepared from ingredients that were readily available to the palace kitchens. Servants understood that their meals were designed to provide energy for work rather than culinary pleasure. The daily schedule for servants' quarters followed natural rhythms of work and rest, with quiet hours observed during times when some servants were sleeping while others were working. This consideration for different schedules was essential in a community where people worked various shifts and needed rest at different times. Noise levels were kept low during sleeping hours, and activities that might disturb others were avoided. Laundry facilities were shared resources that servants used according to established schedules and procedures. Large tubs and washing equipment were maintained collectively, with everyone contributing to their care and cleaning. Servants washed their own clothing and linens, learning to manage their personal cleanliness and appearance with the resources available to them. Social activities in servants' quarters were simple but important for maintaining morale and community bonds. Servants might gather in common areas during rest periods to share news, tell stories, or engage in simple games and conversations. These social interactions provided relief from the demands of work and helped create the sense of community that made shared living arrangements more pleasant and supportive. Religious observances were accommodated within servants' quarters, with space provided for personal prayers and simple religious ceremonies. Many servants found comfort in their faith, and the palace administration recognized that religious practice contributed to social stability and personal contentment among the workforce. Simple religious items and images were allowed in personal and common areas. Illness and injury were addressed through informal networks of mutual care, as servants looked after each other when medical attention was needed. Experienced servants who had learned basic healing techniques from years of necessity provided simple treatments for common ailments. More serious medical problems were referred to palace physicians, though servants understood that their medical care would be basic rather than elaborate. The storage of personal items and work equipment was organised systematically, with designated areas for different types of belongings. Servants were responsible for maintaining their assigned storage space and keeping it clean and organised. This systematic approach prevented loss and confusion, while making efficient use of limited storage areas. Security in servants' quarters was maintained through community vigilance rather than formal guards, as servants understood that theft and disorder would make life unpleasant for everyone. Personal property was generally respected, and disputes were resolved through informal mediation rather than formal punishment. This self-governance system worked effectively because everyone understood the importance of maintaining harmony in shared living spaces. The maintenance of servants' quarters was a collective responsibility, with everyone contributing to cleaning, repairs, and improvements as needed. This shared maintenance work was performed during rest periods and helped ensure that living spaces remained comfortable and functional. Servants took pride in maintaining their quarters, understanding that these spaces represented their homes within the larger palace community. The structure of palace service was organised according to a clear and well-understood hierarchy that determined every aspect of a servant's daily life, from the work they performed to the quarters where they slept, the food they ate, and the people with whom they were allowed to associate. This hierarchical system was not arbitrary or cruel, but rather a practical method for organising the complex operations required to maintain royal households that might include hundreds or even thousands of people. At the highest levels of servant hierarchy were the great officers of the household, individuals who held positions of significant responsibility and authority within the palace structure. These included the chamberlain, who oversaw the royal apartments and personal service, the steward, who managed household finances and supplies, and the marshal, who coordinated transportation and security. These positions were typically held by people from respectable families who had education and experience in management. Below the great officers were the department heads who supervised specific areas of palace operations. The head cook managed all kitchen activities and food preparation. The head groom oversaw the stables and all matters related to horses and transportation. The head gardener managed palace grounds and agricultural activities. These supervisory positions required both technical expertise in their specific areas and leadership skills for managing large numbers of workers. Skilled craftsmen and specialists formed the next level of the hierarchy, including cooks, bakers, seamstresses, carpenters, and other workers who had specific technical abilities that were essential for palace operations. These individuals had typically spent years learning their trades and were valued for their expertise. They enjoyed better working conditions and more security than general labourers, as their specialised skills made them more difficult to replace. Personal servants to royal family members occupied a unique position within the hierarchy, as their proximity to royalty gave them influence and prestige that might exceed their formal rank. Ladies-in-waiting, valets, and other personal servants had access to royal quarters and participated in intimate aspects of royal daily life. This access made them powerful figures within the servant community. even though their positions required complete discretion and loyalty. General servants formed the largest group within palace service, performing the routine tasks that kept the palace functioning on a daily basis. These included chambermaids who cleaned royal apartments, footmen who served at meals and carried messages, laundresses who maintained palace linens, and numerous other workers who performed essential but unglamorous duties. These positions required reliability and competence rather than specialized skills. At the lowest levels of the hierarchy were apprentices and unskilled workers who performed the most basic and physically demanding tasks. These included scullery maids who washed dishes and cleaned kitchens, stable boys who mucked out horse stalls, and various other workers who provided the manual labour that more skilled servants required. These positions were often held by young people who hoped to advance to better positions through experience and demonstrated ability. The progression through this hierarchy was possible, but required time, skill, and often favourable circumstances. A scullery maid who showed aptitude and reliability might eventually become an assistant cook. A stable boy who learned to handle horses well might advance to become a groom. A chambermaid who proved trustworthy might be selected for personal service to a royal family member. These advancements represented significant improvements in working conditions and social status. Compensation and privileges varied significantly according to hierarchical position. Higher-ranking servants received better wages, superior food, more comfortable living quarters, and greater personal freedom. They might be allowed to wear better clothing, have more leisure time, and maintain social relationships that were forbidden to lower-ranking servants. These privileges were both rewards for achievement and incentives for continued loyal service. The responsibilities associated with different hierarchical levels were clearly defined and understood by everyone within the palace community. Higher-ranking servants were expected to supervise and train those below them, ensure that work was completed properly and on time, and maintain the standards of behaviour and performance that palace life required. These responsibilities came with authority, but also with accountability for the actions of subordinates. Training and education opportunities were generally available within the hierarchical system, as experienced servants taught necessary skills to newcomers, and supervisors provided guidance for advancement. This training system ensured that palace operations could continue efficiently, even as individual servants left or retired. Knowledge was passed down through generations of workers who maintained institutional memory and preserved traditional methods. Social interactions within the palace were governed by hierarchical protocols that determined who could speak to whom, under what circumstances, and with what degree of formality. These protocols were not intended to be oppressive, but rather to maintain order and efficiency in a community where many people lived and worked in close proximity. Understanding and following these protocols was essential for successful palace service. The resolution of disputes and conflicts within the servant community typically followed hierarchical lines, with problems being addressed by the appropriate level of authority. Minor disagreements might be resolved by immediate supervisors, while more serious issues would be referred to higher levels of management. This system provided clear channels for addressing problems while maintaining overall order and discipline. Disciplinary measures were also administered according to hierarchical principles, with the severity of punishment reflecting both the seriousness of the offence and the rank of the person involved. Higher-ranking servants were generally subject to less harsh punishment, as their positions were considered more valuable and their training represented a greater investment by the palace administration. The psychological aspects of hierarchical service were significant, as servants learned to find satisfaction and identity within their assigned roles, rather than constantly striving for advancement that might not be possible. This acceptance of one's place in the hierarchy was considered a virtue that contributed to social stability and personal contentment. Servants who performed their duties well, regardless of rank, were respected within the community. Movement between different departments or areas of palace service was possible, but required approval from appropriate supervisors and consideration of staffing needs. A kitchen servant who wanted to transfer to stable work would need to demonstrate relevant skills and wait for an appropriate opening. These transfers allowed for some variety in servant careers while maintaining operational efficiency. The feeding of palace servants was organised according to practical principles that ensured adequate nutrition for hard-working people, while managing the enormous costs and logistical challenges of providing meals for hundreds of individuals every day. The servant dining system reflected the same hierarchical structure that governed all aspects of palace life, but it also demonstrated the administration's understanding that well-fed servants were healthier, stronger, and more capable of performing their duties effectively. The main meal for servants was typically served in the middle of the day, when most workers could take a break from their duties to gather in common dining areas. This meal was substantial and filling, designed to provide the energy needed for afternoon work activities. The timing of servant meals was coordinated with kitchen operations to ensure that food could be prepared and served efficiently without interfering with the preparation of royal meals. Bread formed the foundation of every servant meal, as it provided essential carbohydrates and was filling enough to satisfy hungry workers. The bread served to servants was made from coarser flour than royal bread, but was still nutritious and freshly baked daily. Different types of bread were available depending on the season and the availability of grains, with darker, heartier breads being common during winter months when refined white flour was reserved for royal use. Porridge and stews were staple foods that appeared regularly in servant meals, as these dishes could be prepared in large quantities and were economical to make. Porridge was typically made from oats, barley, or other grains that were readily available and could be cooked with water or milk to create filling, nutritious meals. Stews combined vegetables, grains, and occasional pieces of meat into hearty dishes that provided variety and sustained energy for physical work. Vegetables formed an important part of servant nutrition, with different types available according to seasonal growing patterns. Root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and onions appeared frequently in servant meals, as these crops could be grown easily and stored for long periods. Leafy greens were available during growing seasons and provided important nutrients that prevented common nutritional deficiencies. Meat was included in servant meals, but was not as abundant as in royal dining. Servants typically received cuts of meat that were less expensive or less preferred by royal diners, but these portions still provided essential protein and made meals more satisfying. Preserved meats such as bacon, salt pork, or dried beef appeared regularly, as these could be stored safely and used to flavour stews and other dishes. Dairy products were provided regularly when available, including milk, cheese, and butter that added nutrition and flavour to servant meals. The palace maintained its own dairy animals, ensuring a reliable supply of fresh milk products during most of the year. Cheese was particularly valuable as it could be stored for extended periods and provided concentrated nutrition for physically demanding work. Beverages for servants typically included small beer or ale, which was safer to drink than water and provided additional calories and nutrition. The alcohol content of these drinks was low, so they could be consumed throughout the day without affecting work performance. During harvest seasons, cider made from palace orchards might be available as an alternative to grain-based beverages. The serving of servant meals was organised efficiently to minimise disruption to palace operations. Long wooden tables and benches accommodated many people at once, and food was served from large pots and platters that could feed groups quickly. Servants understood that meals were working breaks rather than social occasions, so they ate efficiently and returned to their duties promptly. Special dietary considerations were accommodated when possible, particularly for servants who were ill or had specific health needs. Kitchen staff understood basic principles of invalid cookery and could prepare softer foods or special broths for servants who were recovering from illness or injury. These accommodations demonstrated the practical understanding that healthy servants were more valuable than sick ones. Seasonal variations in servant meals reflected the natural cycles of food production and preservation. Spring meals featured fresh greens and early vegetables after the limited diet of winter. Summer brought abundant fresh produce and variety in meal preparation. Autumn meals included preservation activities as servants helped prepare foods that would last through winter months. Food storage and distribution for servant meals followed systematic procedures that ensured fair allocation while minimising waste. Experienced servants managed food stores and calculated portions to ensure that meals were adequate without being extravagant. Leftover food from servant meals was used creatively to minimise waste and stretch food budgets. The quality of servant food was generally good, as the palace administration understood that poor nutrition would lead to illness, reduced work capacity, and higher overall costs. While servant meals were simpler than royal dining, they were prepared with care and attention to basic nutritional needs. Servants could generally expect their meals to be filling, reasonably varied, and adequate for maintaining health and energy. Cooking for large numbers of servants required different techniques than preparing royal meals, with emphasis on efficiency and economy rather than elaborate presentation. Large pots and simple cooking methods were used to prepare substantial quantities of food quickly. Servant cooks developed expertise in mass food preparation that ensured consistent quality while managing limited resources effectively. Personal food allowances were sometimes provided for higher-ranking servants, who might receive additional rations of bread, meat, or other items as part of their compensation. These allowances reflected their higher status within the hierarchy and provided incentives for advancement. Lower-ranking servants understood that better food was one of the benefits of advancement within the palace system. The personal service of royalty required a delicate understanding of individual preferences, daily routines, and the subtle rhythms that governed the private lives of kings and queens. This work was performed by skilled servants who had learned to anticipate needs, provide assistance without intrusiveness, and maintain the careful balance between attentiveness and discretion that made royal life comfortable and dignified. The morning routine of royal personal service began well before the royal family awakened. The servants prepared chambers, arranged clothing, and ensured that everything would be ready for the gradual transition from sleep to the activities of the day. This preparation was performed quietly and efficiently, with experienced servants moving through royal apartments like shadows, attending to necessary tasks without disturbing royal rest. The process of royal awakening was managed gently, with personal servants using subtle methods to rouse royalty at the appropriate time. Curtains might be opened gradually to admit natural light, fires might be built up to warm chambers, and quiet preparations would signal that the day was beginning. This process avoided the jarring disruption of sudden awakening, while ensuring that royal schedules were maintained properly. Dressing assistance was provided according to elaborate but comfortable routines that had been developed through years of practice and refinement. Personal servants understood the complex requirements of royal clothing, which involved multiple layers of garments that had to be applied in proper sequence. This process was neither hurried nor delayed, but proceeded at a pace that allowed for conversation, consideration of the day's activities, and attention to details of appearance. Personal hygiene assistance included the provision of warm water for washing, selection of appropriate soaps and oils for skin care, and attention to hair and grooming needs that maintained royal appearance. These intimate services required servants who were completely trustworthy and discreet, as they involved close physical contact and knowledge of personal habits that had to be kept confidential. The selection and arrangement of royal clothing was a daily task that required understanding of fashion, weather conditions, planned activities, and individual preferences. Personal servants maintained royal wardrobes, ensuring that garments were clean, repaired, and ready for use. They also understood the symbolic significance of different clothing choices and could advise on appropriate selections for various occasions. Meal service to royalty was performed with careful attention to timing, temperature, and presentation that made dining pleasant and efficient. Personal servants understood individual dietary preferences and could ensure that food was prepared and served according to royal tastes. They also managed the practical aspects of dining, including the arrangement of table settings and the coordination of multiple courses. Correspondence and communication assistance was provided by personal servants who could read and write, helping royalty manage the complex flow of letters, documents, and messages that royal life involved. These servants often served as intermediaries, receiving messages from various sources and presenting them to royalty in organised and prioritised order. Travel preparation and assistance required personal servants to coordinate the complex logistics of royal movement, including the packing of appropriate clothing and personal items, the arrangement of transportation, and the preparation of temporary accommodations. These tasks required planning and organisational skills as well as understanding of royal needs and preferences. Entertainment and leisure assistance included the arrangement of recreational activities, the management of royal libraries and collections, and the coordination of social events that provided relaxation and enjoyment. Personal servants understood royal interests and could suggest appropriate activities while managing the practical details that made leisure time truly relaxing. Health and medical assistance was provided by personal servants who understood basic principles of health maintenance and could recognise signs of illness or discomfort. These servants worked closely with royal physicians when medical attention was needed and provided ongoing support for maintaining royal health and comfort. evening routines were managed with the same care and attention as morning activities, as personal servants helped royalty transition from the activities of the day to rest and sleep. This included assistance with undressing, the preparation of sleeping chambers, and attention to comfort details that promoted restful sleep. Personal security was an ongoing concern that personal servants addressed through vigilance and discretion, watching for potential threats while maintaining the comfortable atmosphere that made royal life pleasant. These servants understood that their presence provided both practical assistance and psychological security for royalty, who faced various risks and pressures. The emotional aspects of personal service were significant, as personal servants often developed close relationships with the royal family members they served. These relationships required careful navigation of boundaries between professional service and personal affection, as servants had to maintain appropriate respect while providing genuine care and support. Training for personal service positions was extensive and ongoing, as servants learned not only practical skills but also the subtleties of royal etiquette, the complexities of court politics, and the personal preferences that made their service truly valuable. This training was often provided by experienced servants who understood the demands and rewards of personal royal service. The transition from day to evening in royal palaces was marked by a gradual shift in activities and atmosphere, as the busy productivity of daylight hours gave way to different rhythms of evening service, preparation for rest, and the quiet tasks that prepared the palace for night. This transition was managed carefully by servants who understood that royal comfort and security required different types of attention during evening hours. Evening meal preparation and service represented one of the most complex coordination efforts of the palace day, as kitchen staff worked to prepare multiple courses that would be ready simultaneously, while serving staff prepared dining areas and coordinated the delivery of food from kitchens to royal dining rooms. This evening service required the same careful timing that had been perfected through years of practice, ensuring that royal meals were served at the proper temperature and in good condition. The lighting of evening fires throughout the palace was a systematic task that began before sunset and continued until every necessary area was properly illuminated and heated for night activities. Servants moved through established routes, lighting candles and oil lamps according to predetermined schedules that ensured adequate lighting while conserving expensive fuel. This lighting process created a gentle transition from natural daylight to artificial illumination. Personal evening service to royalty involved assistance with changing from day clothing to more comfortable evening attire, help with personal hygiene and grooming for evening activities, and preparation of royal chambers for whatever evening pursuits were planned. These services were provided with the same attention to comfort and preference that characterized all aspects of personal royal service. Security arrangements for night hours required coordination between various types of palace personnel, including guards, servants, and supervisory staff who maintained vigilance throughout the night. These security measures were implemented quietly and systematically, ensuring royal safety without creating an atmosphere of tension or concern that might interfere with evening relaxation and rest. The banking of fires for overnight heating was a crucial evening task that required experience and skill to ensure that chambers would remain warm throughout the night without risk of fire hazards. Servants who performed this work understood the techniques for covering fires with ash and arranging fuel so that steady heat would be maintained for many hours without requiring attention during sleeping hours. Preparation of sleeping chambers involved attention to comfort details that promoted restful sleep, including the arrangement of bedding, the regulation of room temperature, and the elimination of disturbances that might interfere with royal rest. These preparations were performed according to individual preferences that personal servants had learned through careful observation and attention to feedback. Evening inventory and preparation tasks ensured that the palace would be ready for the following day's activities. Kitchen staff prepared ingredients for morning cooking, stable servants ensured that horses were comfortable for the night, and various other workers completed tasks that would make morning routines more efficient and effective. The servant evening meal was typically a lighter affair than the midday dinner, consisting of bread, leftover items from earlier meals, and simple foods that could be prepared quickly and served efficiently. This meal provided necessary nutrition without requiring extensive preparation that would interfere with evening duties or delay the transition to rest periods. Social activities among servants during evening hours were generally quiet and low-key, respecting the fact that some workers needed to rest, while others continued with night duties. These activities might include simple conversation, mending of personal items, or quiet games that provided relaxation without disturbing others or creating noise that might reach royal quarters. Personal hygiene and clothing maintenance tasks were often performed during evening hours, when servants had brief periods of personal time. These activities included washing, mending clothes, and attending to personal grooming needs that helped maintain health and appearance standards required for palace service. Religious observances were accommodated during evening hours, with time provided for personal prayers and participation in simple, religious ceremonies that many servants found comforting and spiritually sustaining. These observances were conducted quietly and respectfully, contributing to the peaceful atmosphere that characterized evening hours in servant quarters. The transition to sleep was managed gradually, with noise levels reduced systematically as more servants completed their duties and retired to their quarters. This gradual transition respected the fact that different servants worked different schedules and needed rest at various times throughout the night period. Night duty assignments were distributed among servants according to established rotations that ensured essential tasks were covered, while allowing most workers to get adequate rest. These night duties included maintaining fires, responding to royal needs that might arise during sleeping hours, and providing basic security and monitoring throughout the palace. Emergency preparedness during night hours required that certain servants remain available to respond quickly to unexpected situations such as illness, fire, or security threats. These emergency response systems were organized efficiently but unobtrusively, ensuring that help would be available if needed without creating anxiety or disturbance during normal night hours. The monitoring of palace conditions during night hours included regular checks of fires, security arrangements, and general palace systems that needed attention even during sleeping periods. These monitoring tasks were performed systematically by servants who understood the importance of maintaining palace operations on a continuous basis. Rest periods for servants were structured to provide adequate sleep while accommodating the varying schedules required for continuous palace operations. Sleeping arrangements took into account the different shifts and duties that required some servants to work during night hours, while others rested for the following day's responsibilities. Palace life followed the natural rhythms of the seasons, with changes in weather, daylight hours, and agricultural cycles creating different patterns of work and daily routine throughout the year. These seasonal variations were anticipated and planned for by experienced palace administrators who understood that effective management required adaptation to natural conditions that could not be controlled or altered. Spring brought renewal and increased activity as palace gardens were prepared for planting, winter damage to buildings and equipment was repaired, and the longer daylight hours allowed for extended work periods and increased productivity. This season required intensive planning and coordination, as servants prepared for the busy months of summer, while completing maintenance tasks that had been postponed during winter weather. Garden work during spring focused on soil preparation, seed planting, and the care of young plants that would provide food for palace inhabitants throughout the growing season. This work required knowledge of agricultural techniques, understanding of local climate conditions, and careful attention to timing that would ensure successful harvests later in the year. Cleaning and maintenance projects were typically undertaken during spring months when weather conditions made extensive work possible and necessary after the confinement of winter. These projects included thorough cleaning of all palace areas, repair of winter damage, and preparation of equipment and facilities for increased summer activity. Summer brought the most intensive period of palace activity, with longer daylight hours allowing for extended work schedules, and the abundance of fresh food requiring intensive preservation activities to ensure adequate supplies for winter months. This season demanded high energy and coordination from all palace workers as they managed increased workloads while maintaining quality standards. Harvest activities during late summer and early autumn required mobilization of large numbers of servants to gather, process, and store the agricultural products that would sustain the palace through winter months. These activities included not only field work but also food preservation techniques such as drying, salting, smoking, and fermentation that ensured food safety and nutritional quality. Autumn brought preparation activities for winter, including the gathering and storage of fuel supplies, the completion of building repairs and weatherproofing, and the processing of agricultural products into forms that would remain safe and nutritious during cold months. This season required careful planning and systematic work to ensure that winter needs would be adequately met. Winter reduced the pace of palace activity as shorter daylight hours and cold weather limited outdoor work and required adaptation of daily routines to indoor activities. This season emphasised careful resource management, maintenance of heating systems, and attention to health and comfort needs that became more challenging during cold months. Fuel consumption during winter required careful planning and conservation, as heating needs increased significantly, while outdoor work to gather wood and other fuel became more difficult. Servants learned techniques for efficient heating and fuel conservation that ensured comfort while managing limited resources effectively. Food preservation and storage became critical during winter months when fresh food was limited and preserved supplies had to be managed carefully to last until spring. This required systematic inventory management and careful rationing to ensure that nutritional needs were met throughout the period of limited fresh food availability. Indoor activities during winter provided opportunities for maintenance and production work that could be performed in heated workshops and workrooms. These activities included textile production, equipment repair, and craft work that contributed to palace operations while providing productive employment during months when outdoor work was limited. Health considerations varied significantly between seasons, with different types of illness and injury being more common at different times of year. Palace medical care adapted to these seasonal patterns, with preventive measures and treatments adjusted to address the health challenges associated with each season's conditions and activities. Clothing and equipment needs change with the seasons, requiring systematic management of wardrobes and tools to ensure that appropriate items were available when needed. This management included seasonal storage, repair and maintenance of seasonal items, and preparation for changing weather conditions that affected both work activities and personal comfort. Religious and ceremonial observances often followed seasonal patterns, with special celebrations and religious services marking important transitions in the agricultural and social year. These observances provided structure and meaning to the annual cycle, while creating opportunities for community celebration and spiritual reflection. Social activities and leisure pursuits were influenced by seasonal conditions, with outdoor activities being more common during pleasant weather, while indoor gatherings became more important during winter months. These seasonal variations in social life provided variety and adaptation to natural conditions, while maintaining community bonds throughout the year. Planning and preparation for seasonal transitions required ongoing attention throughout the year, as palace administrators and experienced servants worked to anticipate needs and prepare for changing conditions. This forward-thinking approach ensured smooth transitions between seasons and adequate preparation for the challenges and opportunities that each season brought. The development of skills necessary for effective palace service was a gradual process that combined formal instruction with practical experience, as new servants learned from experienced workers who passed down knowledge and techniques that had been refined through generations of palace service. This training system ensured that palace operations could continue efficiently while maintaining the high standards that royal life required. Basic skills training began immediately when new servants arrived at the palace, as experienced workers demonstrated the fundamental techniques and procedures that were essential for successful service. This initial training focused on safety procedures, basic work methods, and understanding of palace rules and expectations that new servants needed to know before beginning their assigned duties. Specialised skill development occurred gradually as servants demonstrated aptitude and interest in particular areas of palace work. A servant who showed ability in food preparation might receive advanced training in cooking techniques, while someone with aptitude for textile work might learn more complex sewing and fabric care methods. This specialised training was provided by master craftsmen who understood both technical skills and the specific requirements of palace service. Apprenticeship systems were common for complex trades such as cooking, carpentry, metalworking, and other skilled crafts that required years of practice to master. These apprenticeships combined practical work experience with systematic instruction in techniques and methods that had been proven effective through long experience. Apprentices learned by observing, practicing, and gradually taking on more complex responsibilities. Reading and writing instruction was provided for servants whose duties required literacy skills, though this education was practical rather than extensive, focusing on the specific types of reading and writing that palace service required. This might include reading simple inventories, writing basic reports, or maintaining records related to specific work responsibilities. Etiquette and protocol training was essential for servants who would have contact with royalty or noble visitors, as these interactions required understanding of complex social rules and expectations. This training covered appropriate behaviour, proper forms of address, and the subtle requirements of court protocol that ensured interactions proceeded smoothly and appropriately. Physical conditioning and health maintenance were important aspects of servant training, as palace work was often physically demanding and required stamina, strength, and coordination. Experienced servants taught newcomers techniques for lifting heavy objects safely, working efficiently to avoid exhaustion, and maintaining personal health under demanding working conditions. Problem-solving skills were developed through exposure to various challenges and difficulties that palace service involved, as servants learned to think creatively about solutions to practical problems and adapt to changing circumstances. This problem-solving ability was essential for effective service, as palace life often presented unexpected challenges that required quick thinking and practical solutions. Time management and organisational skills were taught through practical experience with the complex scheduling and coordination that palace operations required. Servants learned to prioritise tasks, manage multiple responsibilities simultaneously, and coordinate their work with other servants to ensure that complex operations proceeded smoothly and efficiently. Communication skills were developed through practice in the various types of interaction that palace service required, from working effectively with fellow servants to communicating appropriately with supervisors and, occasionally, with members of the royal family. These communication skills included both verbal and non-verbal elements that were essential for effective service. Safety training was provided for all palace workers, as the combination of fires, sharp tools, large animals, and complex equipment created various hazards that required knowledge and caution to manage safely. This training included both general safety principles and specific precautions related to particular types of work or areas of the palace. Quality standards training ensured that servants understood the levels of excellence that palace service required and learned techniques for consistently meeting these standards. This training emphasized attention to detail, pride in workmanship, and understanding of how individual contributions affected overall palace operations and royal satisfaction. Cultural and historical knowledge was passed down informally as servants learned about palace traditions, royal preferences and historical practices that influenced current procedures. This cultural knowledge helped servants understand the context and significance of their work, while maintaining continuity with established traditions and expectations. Leadership development was provided for servants who showed potential for supervisory positions, as these individuals needed to learn management skills in addition to technical expertise. This leadership training included understanding of human motivation, techniques for training and supervising others, and methods for maintaining high-performance standards while treating subordinates fairly and respectfully. Continuous learning was encouraged throughout servant careers as palace operations evolved and new techniques became available. Experienced servants continued to learn from each other and adapt their methods to improve efficiency and effectiveness, while maintaining the traditions and standards that defined excellent palace service. The system of rewards and recognition within palace service was designed to acknowledge excellent performance, encourage continued dedication, and provide incentives for advancement that made long-term service attractive to capable individuals. These rewards took various forms, from material benefits to social recognition, creating a framework that valued contribution and loyalty while maintaining high standards of performance. Wage increases and financial bonuses were provided to servants who demonstrated exceptional skill, reliability, and dedication in their assigned duties. These financial rewards were carefully calculated to provide meaningful incentives without creating unsustainable cost increases for palace operations. Experienced servants could earn significantly more than beginning workers, reflecting their increased value and contribution to palace effectiveness. Promotion opportunities were available for servants who proved themselves capable of handling increased responsibility and demonstrated the skills necessary for supervisory or specialized positions. These promotions represented both financial improvement and increased social status within the palace community, providing clear pathways for advancement that encouraged excellence and long-term commitment. Improved living conditions were often provided as rewards for outstanding service, with better quarters, enhanced food allowances, and increased privacy serving as incentives for continued excellence. These improvements in daily life quality were highly valued by servants who understood that better living conditions represented both recognition and practical benefits. Special privileges and perquisites were granted to servants in positions of trust and responsibility, including access to palace resources, permission for family visits, and opportunities for travel that were not available to ordinary servants. These privileges acknowledged the special contributions of valued servants, while providing meaningful rewards that enhanced quality of life. Training and educational opportunities were made available to servants who showed potential for advancement, with access to specialized instruction and skill development that prepared them for better positions. This investment in servant development demonstrated palace commitment to recognizing and developing talent, while ensuring that skilled workers would be available for important positions. Recognition ceremonies and public acknowledgement provided social rewards that were highly valued by servants who took pride in their work and contributions to palace life. These recognition events celebrated excellent service while providing examples and inspiration for other servants who aspired to similar achievement and acknowledgement. Family benefits were sometimes provided to valued servants, including employment opportunities for relatives, educational opportunities for children, and assistance during times of family crisis or need. These family-oriented rewards acknowledged that servant loyalty often extended beyond individual motivation to include concern for family welfare and security. Retirement provisions were available for servants who completed long careers of faithful service, with continued housing, food allowances, and care during old age representing the palace's recognition of lifetime contribution and loyalty. These retirement benefits provided security and dignity for elderly servants, while demonstrating to younger workers that loyal service would be rewarded over the long term. Personal gifts and tokens of appreciation were sometimes given by royal family members to servants who provided exceptional personal service or demonstrated particular loyalty and dedication. These personal acknowledgements were highly prized by recipients and represented direct royal recognition of individual contribution and merit. Professional development opportunities allowed talented servants to learn new skills and take on different types of responsibilities that provided variety and challenge in their careers. This professional growth helped prevent stagnation while ensuring that the palace could benefit from the expanding capabilities of experienced workers. Social integration rewards included invitation to participate in palace celebrations, attendance at special events, and inclusion in activities that provided social contact beyond routine work relationships. These social rewards acknowledged servants as valued members of the palace community, rather than merely workers performing assigned tasks. Legacy recognition ensured that the contributions of exceptional servants would be remembered and honoured after their deaths, with their examples serving to inspire future generations of palace workers. This legacy recognition provided meaning and purpose that extended beyond immediate material rewards to encompass lasting respect and remembrance. Performance feedback systems provided regular acknowledgement of good work and constructive guidance for improvement, ensuring that servants understood how their contributions were valued and how they could continue to develop their skills and effectiveness. This ongoing feedback created a culture of excellence and continuous improvement that benefited both individuals and palace operations. Flexibility and accommodation were provided for valued servants who faced personal challenges or special circumstances, with adjustments to work assignments and schedules that demonstrated palace recognition of individual needs and situations. This flexibility helped retain good workers while demonstrating that the palace valued servants as individuals rather than merely as productive units. The influence of palace servants extended far beyond their immediate duties, as their skills, traditions, and accumulated knowledge created lasting impacts that shaped culinary arts, domestic practices, architectural design, and social customs throughout the broader society. These servants were not merely workers, but also custodians of cultural practices and technical knowledge that influenced development in many areas of human activity. Culinary traditions developed in palace kitchens spread throughout society as former servants carried their knowledge to other positions and shared techniques with family members and communities. The high standards and sophisticated methods required for royal dining contributed to the development of professional cooking that influenced restaurant culture, domestic cooking practices, and food preparation standards in many different contexts. Textile and clothing techniques perfected by palace seamstresses and tailors became models for fashion and garment construction throughout society. The skills required for maintaining royal wardrobes contributed to developments in fabric care, clothing design, and textile production that influenced both luxury and everyday clothing for centuries after the original palace servants had completed their careers. Architectural and interior design concepts developed through palace maintenance and decoration influenced building design and domestic arrangements in homes throughout society. The practical solutions developed by palace servants for heating, lighting, storage, and organisation became models that were adapted for use in many different types of buildings and living situations. Garden and agricultural techniques developed on palace grounds contributed to advancements in food production, landscape design, and horticultural practices that influenced farming and gardening throughout the broader community. The intensive cultivation methods required to feed large palace populations contributed to agricultural innovations that increased food security and production efficiency. Organizational and management systems developed for palace operations influenced business practices, institutional management, and administrative methods in many different types of organizations. The complex coordination required for palace service created models for efficient organization that were adapted for use in commercial enterprises, government agencies, and other institutions. Educational and training methods developed for servant instruction contributed to the development of apprenticeship systems, professional education, and skill development programs that influenced how technical knowledge was transmitted throughout society. The systematic approach to training that palace service required became a model for professional development in many fields. Social customs and etiquette practices developed in palace service influenced standards of behaviour, social interaction, and ceremonial practices throughout society. The protocols and procedures required for royal service contributed to the development of social standards that influenced everything from business practices to family customs and community celebrations. Economic systems and commercial practices were influenced by the large-scale purchasing, inventory management, and resource allocation methods developed for palace operations. The economic impact of palace consumption and the business relationships developed to supply palace needs contributed to commercial development and trade expansion that benefited entire regions. Technological innovations developed to meet palace needs often found applications in other contexts, as the high standards and complex requirements of royal service encouraged the development of improved tools, techniques, and methods that were eventually adopted more widely throughout society. Cultural preservation occurred through palace service as servants maintained traditions, preserved historical knowledge, and passed down cultural practices that might otherwise have been lost. The stability and continuity of palace institutions provided protection for cultural elements that were maintained and transmitted through generations of servant families. Professional standards and work ethics developed through palace service influenced expectations for quality, reliability, and dedication in many different occupations. The high standards required for royal service created models for professional excellence that influenced work culture and performance expectations throughout society. International exchange and cultural diffusion occurred through palace connections with foreign courts and diplomatic relationships, as servants learned about practices and techniques from other cultures and contributed to the spread of innovations and cultural practices across national and regional boundaries. Historical documentation and record-keeping practices developed for palace administration contributed to the preservation of historical information and the development of systematic approaches to information management that influenced scholarly research, legal practices, and institutional memory preservation for centuries. The personal stories and family traditions of palace servants contributed to the social history and cultural memory of their communities, preserving knowledge about historical periods, social conditions, and cultural practices that provided valuable insights for later generations of historians, anthropologists, and cultural researchers. Individual advancement and social mobility achieved by some palace servants demonstrated possibilities for personal improvement and contributed to social changes that gradually expanded opportunities for people from modest backgrounds to achieve better lives through skill development, dedicated service, and personal excellence. And so we reach the end of our gentle journey through the world of palace servants, those countless individuals who dedicated their lives to the steady, methodical work that made royal grandeur possible. Their stories remind us that behind every display of power and luxury were real people, performing essential tasks with patience, skill, and quiet dignity, creating the foundation upon which royal life was built. The servants who lived and worked in royal palaces were not merely employees or labourers, but rather essential participants in a complex social system that required their knowledge, dedication, and careful attention to countless details that kept palace life functioning smoothly and efficiently. Their contributions extended far beyond their immediate duties to influence cultural development, technological advancement, and social progress in ways that continued long after their individual careers had ended. The daily routines and seasonal rhythms that governed palace service created patterns of life that were both demanding and meaningful, providing structure, purpose, and community for people who found satisfaction in work well done and recognition within established systems of advancement and reward. These patterns reflected basic human needs for order, belonging, and accomplishment that made even difficult work bearable when it was performed within supportive communities. The skills and knowledge developed through palace service represented significant achievements in human development, as servants mastered complex techniques and procedures that contributed to advancement in cooking, craftsmanship, organisation, and many other areas of human activity. This knowledge was preserved and transmitted through training systems that ensured continuity while allowing for gradual improvement and adaptation. The hierarchical organisation of palace service, while creating inequalities and limitations, also provided clear pathways for advancement and recognition that allowed capable individuals to improve their circumstances through dedication and skill development. This system, despite its constraints, offered opportunities for personal growth and social mobility that were often unavailable in other circumstances. The social relationships and community bonds formed within palace service provided essential support and meaning for people living in demanding circumstances. These relationships created networks of mutual assistance, shared knowledge, and emotional support that helped individuals survive difficulties while maintaining hope for better futures. The economic aspects of palace service, while often challenging, provided security and stability that were valuable in uncertain times. The combination of regular employment, basic necessities, and opportunities for advancement created economic foundations that supported not only individual servants, but also their families and communities. The cultural and historical significance of palace service extended far beyond individual experiences to encompass the preservation and development of traditions, techniques, and knowledge that influenced broader social development. Servants served as custodians of cultural practices and technical knowledge that contributed to human progress in numerous fields. The personal stories of palace servants, while often unrecorded in formal histories, represented significant human experiences of dedication, adaptation, and quiet achievement that deserve recognition and respect. These individuals faced challenges with courage and creativity, finding ways to maintain dignity and purpose even under difficult circumstances. The legacy of palace service continues to influence contemporary understanding of work, organisation, and social relationships, providing insights into human motivation, community development, and the complex ways that individual contributions combine to create larger social achievements. Most importantly, the stories of palace servants remind us that every complex institution depends on the dedication and skill of ordinary people who perform essential tasks with care and competence, creating the foundation upon which grander achievements become possible. Their quiet contributions deserve recognition and appreciation as essential elements of human social development. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can spare a gentle thought for those thousands of servants who lived lives of steady service, finding meaning and purpose in work that made possible the royal grandeur that captures historical imagination while remaining themselves largely invisible to formal historical record. Their stories remind us that true achievement often lies not in grand gestures, but in faithful completion of daily tasks, performed with skill and dedication over years of quiet service. Their legacy lives on in the traditions they preserved, the skills they developed, the knowledge they transmitted, and the examples they provided of how ordinary people can contribute to extraordinary achievements through patience, dedication, and quiet excellence in whatever work they are called to perform. The ability to move through palace corridors and chambers without being noticed was perhaps the most essential skill that any palace servant could develop, requiring years of practice to master the subtle techniques that allowed them to perform their duties while remaining nearly invisible to the royal family and their guests. This invisibility was not achieved through hiding or avoiding contact, but rather through moving with such quiet efficiency that their presence enhanced royal comfort without drawing attention to the mechanics of service. The physical layout of palaces was designed to facilitate this invisible service, with networks of narrow corridors, concealed staircases, and hidden passages that allowed servants to move throughout the building without being seen by those they served. These service passages ran parallel to the main corridors and connected all the major rooms, creating a hidden circulatory system that enabled the constant flow of servants and supplies that palace life required. Learning to navigate these service passages required memorizing complex routes that often involved multiple turns, level changes, and connections that were not immediately obvious to newcomers. Experienced servants could move through these passages quickly and quietly, even in darkness, carrying heavy loads or managing bulky equipment without making noise that might disturb royal activities or conversations. The timing of servant movement was carefully coordinated to avoid conflicts and ensure that multiple servants could use the same passages without interfering with each other's work. This coordination was achieved through informal scheduling systems that experienced servants understood instinctively, allowing them to anticipate when different areas would be busy and plan their movements accordingly. Entering and leaving royal chambers required particular skill and sensitivity, as servants had to gauge the appropriate moments for their presence and withdraw quickly when their services were not needed. This required reading subtle social cues and understanding the rhythms of royal activities well enough to anticipate needs before being asked, while avoiding intrusion during private moments. The carrying of supplies and equipment through palace spaces was performed using techniques that minimized noise and visual distraction. Servants learned to balance heavy trays and equipment in ways that allowed quiet, efficient movement, even through crowded passages or around obstacles. They also understood how to organize their load so that everything needed for a particular task could be transported in a single trip. Silent communication methods were developed among servants who needed to coordinate their activities without speaking aloud in areas where conversation might disturb royal activities. These methods included subtle hand signals, meaningful glances, and carefully positioned objects that conveyed information about schedules, needs, and potential problems. The management of doors and entries was performed with careful attention to noise control and discretion. Servants learned techniques for opening and closing doors quietly, managing keys and latches without creating disturbance, and timing their entries and exits to minimize disruption to ongoing activities in royal chambers. Personal appearance standards for servants emphasized clothing and grooming that would not draw attention or create distraction during service activities. Servant uniforms were designed to be practical and understated, allowing freedom of movement while maintaining neat, clean appearances that reflected well on palace standards, without competing for attention with royal clothing and accessories. Cleaning activities were performed using methods that minimized noise and visual disruption, while maintaining the high cleanliness standards that palace life required. This included using soft cloths and brushes that cleaned effectively without creating scratching or scraping sounds, and organising cleaning activities during times when royal chambers were unoccupied. Food service required particularly refined invisible service techniques, as meals had to be delivered and served without interrupting royal conversations or activities. Servants learned to anticipate needs for additional items, refills, and course changes while remaining ready to provide these services without being asked directly. The removal of waste and used items was accomplished through systematic methods that ensured unpleasant or unsightly materials were handled discreetly and efficiently. This included managing chamber pots, food scraps, and other waste materials in ways that prevented odours, spills, or visual evidence of these necessary but unpleasant aspects of daily life. Emergency response during invisible service required servants to be prepared for unexpected situations, while maintaining their unobtrusive presence. They had to be ready to respond quickly to accidents, illnesses, or other crises without creating panic or disruption among royal family members who might not understand what was happening. The psychological aspects of invisible service were significant, as servants had to learn to suppress their natural human reactions to interesting conversations, surprising events, or dramatic situations they might witness during their duties. This emotional control was essential for maintaining the trust that made intimate service possible. Training for invisible service was provided through mentorship and gradual exposure to increasingly complex situations. New servants learned by observing experienced workers and gradually taking on more responsibility as they demonstrated mastery of the subtle skills that effective invisible service required. The management of palace laundry was a complex operation that required understanding of different fabric types, stain removal techniques, and preservation methods that ensured the vast quantities of clothing, bedding, and household textiles maintained their appearance and durability despite constant use and washing. This work followed seasonal patterns and daily rhythms that coordinated with other palace activities, while ensuring that clean linens and garments were always available when needed. The sorting of laundry was the first step in a systematic process that separated items according to fabric type, colour, level of soiling, and special care requirements. Experienced laundresses could examine items quickly and determine the appropriate cleaning methods based on the materials involved and the types of stains or soil that needed to be removed. Water preparation for laundry involved heating large quantities of water to various temperatures and preparing different types of cleaning solutions for different categories of items. The laundry area featured large copper vessels that were heated over fires, with systems for transferring hot water to washing tubs while maintaining appropriate temperatures for effective cleaning. Soap making was often performed within the palace laundry operation, using animal fats, plant oils, and alkaline materials to create cleaning agents that were effective for removing different types of soil and stains. The quality and composition of these soaps were adjusted based on the intended use and the types of fabrics being cleaned. Hand-washing techniques varied according to the delicacy and value of different items, with fine royal garments receiving gentle treatment, while sturdier servant clothing and household linens were subjected to more vigorous cleaning methods. These techniques were learned through experience and practice, as effective cleaning required understanding how much agitation different fabrics could tolerate. Stain removal was a specialized skill that required knowledge of different cleaning agents and techniques for addressing specific types of stains. Blood, wine, food, ink, and other common stains each required different approaches, and experienced laundresses developed expertise in selecting and applying appropriate treatments. Rinsing procedures ensured that soap residues were completely removed from cleaned items, preventing fabric damage and skin irritation that could result from inadequate rinsing. This process often required multiple rinses with clean water, and laundresses learned to judge when items were properly rinsed based on the feel and appearance of the fabric. Drying methods were adapted to weather conditions and seasonal factors, with indoor drying areas used during cold or wet weather, while outdoor lines and racks were preferred when conditions permitted faster, more thorough drying. The arrangement of items for drying required knowledge of how different fabrics behaved and what positioning would promote even drying without stretching or damage. Pressing and finishing of cleaned items involved techniques for removing wrinkles and restoring proper shape and appearance to garments and linens. This work was performed using heated irons and pressing boards, with different temperatures and techniques used for different types of fabrics to achieve good results without causing heat damage. Folding and storage systems ensured that cleaned items were organized efficiently and stored in ways that prevented wrinkling, pest damage, and other problems that could affect their condition before use. These storage systems were systematic and well organized, allowing quick location and retrieval of specific items when they were needed. Mending and repair work was often performed in conjunction with laundry activities, as items needing small repairs were identified during the cleaning process and could be mended before being returned to use. This integration of cleaning and repair helped extend the useful life of palace textiles while maintaining their appearance and functionality. Inventory management for palace textiles required tracking large numbers of items through the complete cleaning and maintenance cycle, ensuring that items were cleaned regularly and returned promptly to their assigned locations. This tracking was accomplished through systematic organization and careful record keeping that prevented loss and ensured availability. Quality control in laundry operations involved regular inspection of cleaned items to ensure that cleaning standards were met and that any remaining problems were identified and addressed. This quality control helped maintain the high appearance standards that palace life required while identifying items that needed special attention or repair. Seasonal variations in laundry work reflected changing weather conditions, different types of clothing and bedding used during different times of year, and varying availability of water and fuel for heating. Laundresses adapted their methods and schedules to these seasonal factors while maintaining consistent quality in their work. Training and skill development in laundry work involved learning to recognize different fabric types and their care requirements, mastering various cleaning and finishing techniques, and developing the organizational skills needed to manage complex washing and maintenance schedules efficiently. The coordination of laundry activities with other palace operations ensured that cleaning schedules did not interfere with royal activities while guaranteeing that clean items were available when needed. This coordination required understanding palace schedules and planning laundry work to complement, rather than conflict with other essential activities. The maintenance of palace grounds was a year-round responsibility that encompassed formal gardens, working agricultural areas, animal care facilities, and various outdoor spaces that contributed to both the practical functioning and aesthetic appeal of royal residences. This work required knowledge of horticulture, animal husbandry, and landscape management that ensured palace grounds remained productive, attractive, and suitable for royal activities throughout all seasons. Garden design and layout reflected both practical needs for food production and aesthetic considerations that created pleasant environments for royal recreation and entertainment. The planning of these gardens required understanding of local climate conditions, soil characteristics, and seasonal growing patterns that determined what crops could be grown successfully and when different planting and harvesting activities should be performed. Soil preparation and improvement was ongoing work that involved adding organic matter, adjusting soil composition, and creating optimal growing conditions for different types of plants. This work required knowledge of composting, fertilizing, and soil management techniques that maintained and improved growing conditions over time. Seed selection and planting followed systematic schedules that ensured continuous production of fresh food throughout the growing season, while providing adequate quantities of preserved foods for winter consumption. The timing of planting activities was coordinated with seasonal weather patterns and the specific requirements of different crops. Crop maintenance involved regular weeding, watering, and pest control activities that protected growing plants and ensured healthy development throughout the growing season. These maintenance activities required daily attention and knowledge of plant diseases and pest problems that could threaten crop production. Harvest activities were carefully timed to ensure that crops were gathered at peak quality and processed quickly to prevent spoilage. These activities often required mobilizing large numbers of workers for intensive periods of gathering, processing, and preservation work that had to be completed within limited time periods. Food preservation techniques included drying, salting, fermentation, and storage methods that ensured harvested crops remained safe and nutritious throughout winter months when fresh food was not available. These preservation activities required specialized knowledge and equipment that palace grounds operations maintained and operated efficiently. Ornamental gardening for aesthetic purposes created attractive outdoor spaces that provided pleasant environments for royal recreation while demonstrating the prosperity and sophistication of the royal household. These ornamental gardens required different skills and techniques than food production, but were equally important for palace operations. Animal husbandry operations included care of dairy cows, poultry, pigs, and other livestock that provided food products for palace consumption. These operations required knowledge of animal nutrition, healthcare, breeding, and housing that ensured productive and healthy animal populations throughout the year. Stable management for horses used for transportation and recreation required specialized knowledge of equine care, including feeding, grooming, exercise, and health maintenance that kept these valuable animals in good condition for royal use. The importance of horses in medieval transportation made stable operations critical for palace functioning. Pasture management and feed production ensured that palace animals had adequate nutrition throughout the year, including hay production and storage for winter feeding, when fresh grazing was not available. This management required understanding of grass production, haymaking, and storage techniques that preserved feed quality. Waste management for both plant and animal waste involved composting and disposal systems that prevented health problems while recycling organic materials back into soil improvement programs. These systems were essential for maintaining sanitary conditions while making productive use of waste materials. Water management systems, including wells, irrigation, and drainage, ensured adequate water supplies for both plant and animal needs while preventing flooding and waterlogging that could damage crops and facilities. These systems required ongoing maintenance and seasonal adjustments to function effectively. Tool and equipment maintenance for grounds operations involved care of hand tools, larger implements, and specialized equipment used for various agricultural and landscaping activities. This maintenance was essential for efficient work and required knowledge of tool repair and replacement that kept operations running smoothly. Weather protection and adaptation involved techniques for protecting crops and animals from adverse weather conditions including frost, excessive heat, storms, and drought. These protection methods required understanding of local weather patterns and having systems in place to respond quickly to changing conditions. Seasonal planning and preparation ensured that grounds operations adapted smoothly to changing weather and growing conditions throughout the year. This planning involved preparing for winter weather, spring planting, summer maintenance, and autumn harvest activities that each required different types of work and resources. Integration with palace operations ensured that grounds activities supported kitchen needs, provided appropriate environments for royal activities, and contributed to the overall functioning of palace life without interfering with other essential operations. The management of fire in royal palaces was perhaps the most critical and dangerous responsibility that palace servants faced, as fire provided essential heating for warmth and cooking, while representing a constant threat that could destroy entire buildings and cost many lives if not handled with proper knowledge and constant vigilance. This work required understanding of different types of fuel, fire behaviour, and safety practices that ensured palace operations could continue safely throughout all weather conditions. Fuel procurement and storage involved gathering, preparing, and organising large quantities of wood, charcoal, and other combustible materials that palace operations required throughout the year. This procurement had to be planned well in advance to ensure adequate supplies during winter months when fuel consumption was highest, and procurement was most difficult. Wood selection and preparation required knowledge of different tree species and their burning characteristics, as various types of wood burned at different temperatures and rates that made them suitable for different purposes. Hardwoods were preferred for heating fires that needed to burn steadily for long periods, while softer woods were used for quick cooking fires that needed to heat rapidly. Fire starting techniques using flint, steel, tinder, and kindling required skill and practice to achieve reliable ignition even under difficult conditions. Palace servants became expert at starting fires quickly and efficiently, understanding how to prepare materials and arrange them for successful ignition under various weather conditions. Fire building methods varied according to the intended purpose, with different arrangements of fuel and airflow used for heating fires, cooking fires, and specialized applications such as metalworking or large-scale food preparation. These different fire configurations required understanding of combustion principles and practical experience with different burning patterns. Temperature control and regulation involved techniques for adjusting fire intensity and heat distribution to meet specific requirements for cooking and heating. This control was achieved through management of fuel, airflow, and fire arrangement that required constant attention and adjustment based on changing needs and conditions. Safety procedures and fire prevention were essential aspects of fire management that required constant vigilance and systematic approaches to reducing fire hazards. These procedures included proper storage of fuel and combustible materials, maintenance of clean chimneys and flues, and rapid response protocols for fire emergencies. Chimney and flue maintenance involved regular cleaning and inspection of smoke removal systems that carried dangerous combustion gases away from palace interiors. This maintenance was essential for preventing fires and carbon monoxide poisoning that could result from blocked or damaged chimney systems. Ash removal and disposal had to be performed safely to prevent accidental fires from hot coals that might remain active in seemingly cold ash. The procedures for ash handling included proper cooling, storage, and disposal methods that prevented fire hazards while making productive use of ash for soap making and agricultural applications. Banking fires for overnight heating required techniques for arranging fuel and controlling airflow, so that fires would burn slowly and steadily throughout the night without requiring attention, while maintaining safe conditions that prevented overheating or accidental ignition of nearby materials. Emergency response procedures for fire outbreaks included rapid alarm systems, organised firefighting efforts, and evacuation plans that could be implemented quickly when fires occurred despite prevention efforts. These procedures required training and coordination among palace personnel to ensure effective response during crisis situations. Candle and lamp management for interior lighting required knowledge of different types of lighting. Fuels and equipment, including proper trimming of wicks, refilling of oil supplies, and positioning of lights to provide adequate illumination while minimizing fire hazards from open flames. Cooking fire management required specialized techniques for maintaining consistent temperatures and heat distribution that ensured proper food preparation, while preventing burning or uneven cooking that could waste food or create health hazards from undercooked items. Heating system coordination throughout palace complexes involved managing multiple fires and heating sources to ensure comfortable temperatures in various areas, while balancing fuel consumption and maintaining safety standards across all palace operations. Seasonal fire management adapted techniques and procedures to changing weather conditions and fuel availability throughout the year. Winter required intensive heating with careful fuel conservation, while summer required reduced heating with increased attention to fire prevention during dry conditions. Training and skill development in fire management was provided through careful mentorship and gradual assumption of responsibility, as the knowledge and skills required for safe fire management could only be developed through extensive practice under experienced supervision. The transition from day to evening activities in royal palaces required careful coordination and systematic preparation that ensured royal comfort and security throughout the night hours, while organising palace operations for the following day. This transition period was marked by specific routines and protocols that had been refined through years of experience to create smooth, efficient changeovers from daytime to nighttime activities. Lighting preparations for evening hours began well before sunset, as servants systematically lit candles, oil lamps and torches throughout palace areas that would be used during evening activities. This lighting process followed established routes and schedules that ensured adequate illumination was available when needed, while conserving expensive lighting materials by avoiding unnecessary illumination of unused areas. Fire banking and heating adjustments were performed to ensure that palace chambers would remain comfortable throughout the night, without requiring attention during sleeping hours. This work required understanding of fire behaviour and heat distribution that allowed servants to calculate fuel loads and airflow settings that would provide steady heating for extended periods. Food service transitions from formal dining to lighter evening refreshments required coordination between kitchen and serving staff to ensure that royal preferences for evening meals were met, while organising kitchen operations for the following day's meal preparation. This transition often involved preparing special items that could be served quickly if requested during evening hours. Security arrangements for night hours involved coordination between guards and servants to ensure that palace buildings were properly secured while maintaining access for essential nighttime services. These arrangements included checking locks and barriers, while ensuring that emergency access routes remained available for rapid response if needed. Personal service preparations for royal bedtime routines required organising appropriate clothing, toiletries, and other items that would be needed for evening personal care and morning preparation. These preparations were made discreetly in advance so that evening service could proceed smoothly without delays or disturbances. Servant scheduling for night duties involved organising coverage for essential services that might be needed during nighttime hours, while ensuring that most servants could rest adequately for the following day's work. This scheduling required balancing service availability with reasonable rest requirements for palace workers. Communication systems for nighttime emergencies ensured that rapid contact could be established between different palace areas if problems arose during night hours. These systems included positioning of personnel and establishment of signal methods that could summon assistance quickly without creating unnecessary alarm or disturbance. Waste removal and cleaning activities were often scheduled for evening hours when royal activities were minimal and cleaning work could be performed without interference. These activities included chamber pot service, food waste removal, and general cleaning that prepared palace areas for the following day's activities. Temperature and ventilation adjustments for sleeping hours involved regulating airflow and heating systems to create comfortable sleeping conditions, while preventing problems such as overheating or inadequate air circulation that could affect sleep quality or health. Entertainment and leisure preparations might include organising materials for reading, music, games, or other evening activities that royal family members might choose to pursue during leisure hours. These preparations ensured that appropriate materials and equipment were readily available without requiring special arrangements. Medicine and health preparations for nighttime included organising access to medical supplies and personnel that might be needed for health emergencies during night hours. These preparations were particularly important given the limited medical knowledge and resources available during historical periods. Weather protection measures for nighttime involved ensuring that palace buildings were properly sealed against rain, wind, and cold, while maintaining adequate ventilation for healthy air circulation. These measures required understanding of building systems and weather patterns that affected indoor comfort and safety. Inventory and supply preparation for the following day involved organising materials and supplies that would be needed for morning activities, ensuring that essential items were readily available and properly positioned for efficient morning work routines. Documentation and record-keeping activities were often performed during evening hours, when other duties were less demanding, allowing servants to complete administrative tasks related to inventory, scheduling, and activity reporting that kept palace operations organised and accountable. In these quiet hours before sleep, we've walked through the measured world of palace servants, exploring the daily rhythms and seasonal patterns that shaped lives dedicated to the ancient art of service. These men and women were not merely workers performing assigned tasks, but rather skilled practitioners of complex crafts, who understood that royal comfort and palace efficiency depended on their careful attention to thousands of details that required both technical knowledge and personal dedication. The world we have explored tonight was one where every task had its proper time and method, where knowledge was passed down through generations of patient teaching, and where individual contribution was valued as part of a larger community effort that created something greater than any single person could achieve alone. This world operated according to natural rhythms that connected human activity to seasonal cycles and daily patterns that provided structure and meaning to lives that might otherwise have seemed repetitive or limiting. The servants whose lives we have examined found purpose and satisfaction in work that was essential for the functioning of complex social institutions, contributing their skills and dedication to enterprises that preserved cultural traditions, while providing security and prosperity for entire communities. Their individual contributions, while often unrecorded in formal histories, were collectively responsible for maintaining the material foundations that made possible the cultural and political achievements that we remember and study today. The skills and knowledge that palace servants developed through their years of service represented significant human achievements in areas ranging from food preparation and textile care to building maintenance and agricultural production. These achievements were passed down through informal education systems that ensured continuity while allowing for gradual improvement and adaptation to changing conditions and requirements. The social relationships and community bonds that developed within palace service created support networks that helped individuals cope with challenging working conditions while maintaining hope for personal advancement and family security. These relationships demonstrated the human capacity for mutual assistance and cooperation, even within hierarchical systems that created inequalities and limitations. The economic aspects of palace service, while often difficult, provided security and advancement opportunities that were valuable in uncertain times when alternative employment might be dangerous or unavailable. The combination of regular wages, basic necessities, and potential for improvement created economic foundations that supported not only individual servants, but also their families and broader communities. The cultural significance of palace service extended far beyond immediate practical contributions to encompass the preservation and transmission of traditional knowledge, techniques, and social practices that might otherwise have been lost during periods of political and economic instability. Palace institutions provided continuity that protected cultural achievements and made possible their transmission to future generations. The personal experiences of palace servants, while varying greatly among individuals and historical periods, shared common elements of adaptation, perseverance, and quiet achievement that demonstrate fundamental human capacities for finding meaning and satisfaction in service to larger purposes. These experiences remind us that individual fulfillment can be found in many different types of work, when that work is performed within supportive communities and recognised for its essential contributions. The historical legacy of palace service systems continues to influence contemporary understanding of work organisation, professional development, and institutional management. providing insights into effective methods for coordinating complex operations while maintaining quality standards and supporting worker welfare. Most importantly, the stories of palace servants remind us that behind every complex achievement are countless individual contributions that deserve recognition and respect, even when those contributions are not celebrated in formal histories or public recognition. Their quiet dedication created the foundations upon which more visible achievements became possible, demonstrating that true service often lies not in seeking recognition but in faithfully performing essential tasks that benefit others and contribute to the common good. As we conclude our gentle journey through their world, we can appreciate how these servants found dignity and purpose in lives dedicated to service, creating through their collective efforts the stable foundations that made possible the royal grandeur that captures historical imagination, while themselves remaining largely invisible to formal historical record. Their legacy reminds us that meaningful work can be found in service to others, and that individual contributions, however modest they might seem, become significant when they are part of larger enterprises dedicated to creating and maintaining the institutions and traditions that preserve and advance human civilization. So let us rest tonight with appreciation for those countless servants who lived lives of patient service, understanding that their dedication and skill created the quiet foundation upon which royal life was built, and remembering that their example of faithful service and quiet excellence remains relevant for anyone seeking to contribute meaningfully to the communities and institutions that make our own lives possible and secure.